Secretary of State Marco Rubio seemed to have a come-to-Jesus moment this week. Yeah, he had a very friendly meeting with one of Trump's enemies, the Pope. He also went viral for answering a question from the Christian Broadcast Network about his vision for America. Watch.
My hope for America is what it's always been. I think it's the hope I hope we all share. We want it to continue to be the place where anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, where you're not limited by the circumstances of your birth, by the color of your skin, by your ethnicity, but frankly, it's a place where you are able to overcome challenges and achieve your full potential. I think that should be the goal of every country in the world, frankly, but I think in the U.S., we're not perfect. Our history is not one of perfection, but it's still better than anybody else's history, and ours is a story of perpetual improvement. Each generation has left the next generation of Americans freer, more prosperous, safer, and that is our goal as well.
How about stop taking our voting rights away?
Yeah, how about that?
How about that? How about not rounding up immigrants unlawfully?
Yeah, well,
that sounds an awful lot like a campaign speech. Is he doing damage control so he can run in 2028?
It actually is a campaign speech. I have been hearing the same version of these words from Marco for 20-plus years. I've known Marco since we were in our 20s. And it kind of breaks my heart because I remember finding him so inspiring. You know, he just has this aspirational quality to him. He's incredibly eloquent. His personal story is so poignant. But it all rings so hollow now for him to say that we live in a country where the color of your skin doesn't matter, where you came from doesn't matter.
Please.
When he has been silently complicit, serving an administration that targets people, racially profiles people, you know, is basically persecuting and torturing Latinos and Latino immigrants, is taking away voting rights from the African Americans, firing people for the color of their skin. So it just, to me, it's heartbreaking and it's disappointing, but I do think Marco is going to end up running in 2028. I know that he tries to play nice, that J.D. Vance and him try to play like they're buddies. I've seen this movie before. I remember when he was Jeb Bush's mentee, when he was incredibly buddy with Jeb Bush and stabbed him in the back. So if I were J.D. Vance, I wouldn't look the other way.
Listen, Marco Rubio is somebody who, that speech felt like, those remarks felt like vintage Marco Rubio. I remember watching him at the 2012 Republican convention when Mitt Romney was accepting the nomination, and he had, to Anna's point, this aspirational tone. He talked about how his dad was the guy tending bar at the back of the room so he could someday be the guy giving a speech at the front of the room. And I remember thinking, this is the future of the Republican Party. He's somebody that I've supported, that I thought so highly of. It's hard to reconcile who he's become in the Trump era, but from a political analysis standpoint, I will say this. He's incredibly formidable. Donald Trump is somebody that has really engaged Democrats. I think Democrats will do well running against Trump's agenda in 2026 midterms. But come 2028, Donald Trump is not on the ballot, and someone like a Marco Rubio could be incredibly hard to beat. He is much more eloquent than Donald Trump. He's much, in my opinion, smarter, well-versed in foreign policy, well-versed in domestic issues, and he's somebody who has a much broader appeal, I would think, with moderates and independents. So I think J.D. Vance played to the base. He played to like a small corner of the universe, and I don't think that he's formidable as a general, especially as a general election candidate. The odds-on favorite for the Republican nominee for 2028 as of today are absolutely Marco Rubio.
Well, then the Republicans are going to lose because I do not think that Marco Rubio can remove the stench of the Trump administration from his very being. He is the son of immigrants from Cuba that came here in 1956. How dare he stand by complicitly and allow Latinos to be rounded up, allow American citizens to be shot in the face and shot in the chest and shot in the back? How dare he allow the voting, stand by idly while the Voting Rights Act is gutted and disenfranchising African-American voting, something that African-Americans who built this joint for free, who built this country for free, be disenfranchised of their vote. And at the moment, as the Secretary of State, immigrants from travel ban countries are currently in limbo. The Trump administration has expanded travel restrictions to include 39 countries facing full or partial bans, a lot Black and brown countries. And what about Haiti? You think a Haitian is allowed to be here with their temporary status just thrown away and going back to a country that is in complete political turmoil when his very parents left political turmoil and found asylum here?
Actually, can I tell you something? They didn't leave political turmoil. They left, as you mentioned, in 1956.
1956.
So they left before the Cuban Revolution. They left because they were poor. They left like so many people leave Mexico, leave some other countries because they were looking for for economic opportunities.
Even worse.
Right.
Even worse than on Marco Rubio.
And his grandfather, at one point, had a deportation order. His grandfather, who he adored, had a deportation order against him, would have been deported under Trump.
I would be interested to see if Marco Rubio became the candidate where his interests would be, because I don't think they would align with the MAGA that we've seen. I think that is the break in the party. J.D. Vance would be a despicable candidate, and as an independent, I would say Rubio has a much better chance of playing to someone like me. J.D. Vance has no chance.
But if he dares say in a Republican primary that he disagrees with Trump and has his own thoughts, Trump will come out.
You saved that for the general election, baby.
You saved that because he has more appeal than even a Donald Trump does. He does have a competence, and although I don't know if he can ever remove this stink, I'm glad he's in the rooms right now, because when he spoke at Davos, he spoke about the unifying idea. He does things that aren't MAGA-esque. He plants them in speeches, and I don't know if J.D. Vance doesn't understand or Donald Trump doesn't understand, but he's messaging in a different way.
I do want to mention, though, I think that it'll be very telling what Rubio decides to do after the midterm. So if it goes the way we expect, where Democrats take back the House, the Senate looks more competitive for Democrats than it has, does he stick around and stay till the bitter end with Trump, or does he say, I want to spend a little more time with my wife and kids and give himself some space to be able to run for office?
I think he has to ride with Trump as long as Trump's there.
We need to remember, when people tell you who they are, the first time you believe them.
That's right.
And I believe them.